You ever listen to somebody communicate and wonder when they're done talking if they really meant to say what they said? Or even worse, do they really mean to say what they said and they actually believe that what they said was true? Or have you ever encountered that time when you hear somebody say something and they say it with great conviction, but it's kind of like that hostage video, if you will. You know they're saying it with great conviction, but only because they're being forced to? What I want to talk about today is the leader who communicates not what they're intending to communicate, but something that intended to mislead you in the first place. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. And as a communications coach, one of the things that I notice often about communicators is they have a tendency to say not what they mean, sometimes not even what they intended to say, but they tend to say, they have a tendency of saying what they believe the audience wants to hear. Or, worse, they believe the audience needs to hear because the audience needs to take action, even if this leader doesn't actually believe that. Now, we've seen it from the stage, we've seen it on news reports, we've seen it in politics, we see it in sales pitches on a regular basis, we see it in investment sales pitches. If you want to see a really good example of this, just watch Shark Tank sometime. You'll see people who come on and they present their ideas in a way that makes them seem way bigger than they are, until someone starts asking the tough questions about the numbers and the process and the background and how did you get here. It's real easy to spot a pure opportunist when you start asking the tough questions, because they'll tell you everything they believe you want to hear and need to hear to make the decision they want you to make. That's called a false narrative. It's not really what they believe. It's not really what's true. It's what they believe will make you make the decision they want you to make. Now, honestly, some people, like good chess players, they get way out ahead of that kind of communication. They're not giving you the narrative because they believe it right now. They may not even be giving you the narrative because they believe it will benefit you right now. What they're trying to do is coach you into a set of beliefs so that a little later down the road, when they bring up something else, you already have an impression in your mind that they know, believe, and have acted on the first point. It's called setting up the premise. There's no point in telling a joke if there's not an A, a B, and a 3. You have no joke. If you can't set it up to begin with, the setup is half the joke. There's no punchline if there's no setup. In the same way, in manipulating a group of people, whether it's a small collection of friends and you're trying to pit some drama between one individual and another, or it's a large group of people like an audience and you're trying to get them to emotionally move along a pathway with you, or it is a mass of people like a society or a culture, you're going to have to spend a little more time in the chess moves, laying out the premises long before the event, so that when the punchline gets here, all of the underlying work is already done. Now, a weak communicator does that by accident. And what I mean by that is sometimes they'll throw out ideas that they've heard somewhere else that they believe are popular among your audience or your crowd or your demographic. They'll say things that they think, well, this is really going to go over well with this crowd, and then realize that it falls flat. And now they're kind of backpedaling. They accidentally set themselves up for something further down the road. Whether that's good or bad is yet to be determined. It depends on how fast they think on their feet. But a good propagandist, a good manipulator, they've already done all the homework. They have a pretty good idea before they make the statement how you're going to emotionally react to it, what kind of actions you will take as a result of that, and where they can lead you down the path later on once this premise is established. Now, they don't care that the premise is a false premise. They don't care that they really don't believe the ideas that they're telling you. What they care about is whether or not you get emotionally involved in it. If you get emotionally involved in that premise, in that idea, in that thought, then later on they can use your emotional involvement in that thought to change the behavior that you're coming to the table with. The way that an entire group or society reacts is often driven by the emotional response to something that hasn't yet happened. That it's a potentiality, but it's not a reality. Sometimes that reaction, that emotional response, is out of fear. If you can lay the groundwork of fear way in advance, this is what you should be afraid of. These are the things that could happen to you. This is what the next turn around the corner is going to be. Sometimes that fear alone is enough anticipation to modify behavior. Ask yourself, have you ever hidden in a dark place just to startle a friend? And while you were standing there, you realized how ideal it would be if the person with the hacksaw was actually standing right behind you. How perfect it would be for them to not even know that you were gone because you're hidden so well, and then you get scared of the thing you're trying to scare them with. It happens. It happens all the time. Ask a 10-year-old boy who tried to scare his girlfriend or his sister, and you're going to find it's a pretty common occurrence. If it hadn't happened to you yet, it probably will. Unfortunately, for a lot of people who live in the world of demagoguery and communication, they find themselves creating a false narrative so that they can set up a premise for a future frightening event that hasn't yet happened, so there's no reality in it. It's just conjecture. And yet then they find themselves being horrified of the narrative they've delivered. Not the reality, not even the potentiality, just the narrative. So you need to ask yourself, when you hear these frightening things in conversation, when you hear leaders spout things that would terrify the masses, is this weak communication? Is this intentional narrative, false narrative? Or is this a long setup for a long game that's only beginning now in the premise? What will later become demagoguery, propaganda, manipulation of the masses. If you listen for those things in the communication of the people who are leading you, you'll have a really good idea where you're going in the near future. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.